I'm gonna go out on a whim and say that this isn't controversial. I think that the vast majority of people can probably agree that Nintendo has had a historic run with the Nintendo Switch. And with the Switch 2 looming in the horizon, I feel like right now would be a great time to really just look back on the past 8 years we spent together with the Switch and appreciate every first we've seen. But let's stop wasting time and look at our first. Nintendo's first with the Nintendo Switch, I'm sorry guys, I might have to say the word first quite a few times in this video, so please bear with me, was the fact that this was Nintendo's first ever hybrid console. And as far as I'm aware, I think this was the first hybrid console period on the market. Like, I remember the PSP being able to connect to the TV, but at the end of the day, the PSP was still the PlayStation Portable. It was a handheld console, not a home console, so it doesn't really count as a hybrid. But if there was a hybrid console before the Switch, feel free to fact check me in the comments. But regardless if anybody else did it before Nintendo, this for Nintendo was their first hybrid console. But speaking of the hybrid nature of the Nintendo Switch, that brings us to our next first. Of course, because of this hybrid nature, as we all know, means that this console shared both the title of a handheld console and home console. So because of that, that makes the Nintendo Switch Nintendo's first ever portable home console. Yes, the GameCube had a handle, but no, that does not count. Moving on to the third first, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild introduced the series' first fully open world gameplay. Technically, this could be considered only a half-truth because of course, the game was meant for the Wii U, but it just ended up being delayed so long that Nintendo just ended up making it a cross-gen title. But with how massive of a failure the Wii U was, Nintendo was more than ready to move on from the Wii U, and I wouldn't be surprised if Nintendo considers this more a Nintendo Switch game rather than a Wii U game, so I'm putting it on the list. Next, the Switch was the first console to release a major DLC as a standalone game. Xenoblade Chronicles 2 Torn of the Golden Country was the first time that Nintendo released a DLC as a standalone game. However, as you would imagine, the game was pretty limited physically, and I vividly remember going into a GameStop one time and seeing it on the shelf and not picking it up. And to this day, I still pull my hair every time I think about that because I am yet to find it again to add it to my collection. Next up, we're going to talk about Pokemon. With the Nintendo Switch, this was the first time that a Pokemon mainline game was on a home console. In 2019, when Pokemon Sword and Shield came out, it wasn't the first time we could play Pokemon on the go, but it was the first time we could play a mainline game on the TV. However, this game wasn't without its controversy because this was also the first time that there wasn't a national dex in a Pokemon game. Even though I can understand why people were upset about this, personally I think it was a good move. Because realistically, there's just so many Pokemon out there that some of them just end up being forgotten, and now that we're kind of like subbing them in and out of games, every time you see some in a game, they feel that much more special because they're not competing with all of these Pokemon that exist. Plus, when every Pokemon is in every game, let's be real, you always lean towards the same ones, so this kind of forces you to try new ones. Next up, we're going to talk about Super Smash Bros. Because with Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, it was the first time that every single fighter from previous entries in the franchise made it back into the game, and by extension, making it the largest roster in the series history. Next up, we're going to talk about a first that is a little less fun. The Switch introduced Nintendo Switch Online, which brought features like cloud saves, access to classic games, and online multiplayer behind a paywall, because this was Nintendo's first paid online service for a Nintendo console. When the Switch first came out, Nintendo Switch Online was free, but the NSO game library was not available either, so that's probably why. But Nintendo had impeccable timing to start charging for online services because the Nintendo Switch has become the first Nintendo home console to reach 8 years on the market before being replaced. Which means that Nintendo has been able to pass go on our yearly subscriptions multiple times. We still have plenty of firsts to go over, but before we do that, I have a quick message to say. If this is your first time here, hey, my name's Acadrien and I post weekly Nintendo videos just like this. So if that's something you think you'd enjoy, I would greatly appreciate it if you would consider to like and subscribe. And with that out of the way, let's go right back into the video. Moving on to some more first, we're gonna stick with the online theme, because the port of Super Mario 3D World plus Bowser's Fury allowed for online co-op play for the first time in the Mario series. But this game was special for another reason, because not only that, it was also the first game to be ported with a new game mode. because Super Mario 3D World Plus Bowser's Fury introduced the new Bowser's Fury open world mode, combining traditional Mario platforming with a free roaming environment. And speaking of Mario firsts, there was also Super Mario Party, that became the first Mario Party game to have online multiplayer. Although the game didn't initially release with it, it did awkwardly get an update for it 2 years later. But weird timing aside, it was just really nice to see. Next up, we're going to talk about Splatoon 2, because Splatoon 2 was the first Splatoon game to receive DLC. And once you did beat the Octo expansion, it was the first time you were able to play as an Octoling. Next, we saw our first 3D Kirby game. Kirby and the Forgotten Land marked the first full 3D platforming adventure in the Kirby series. This game was great because I feel like it really set the bar of what a modern Kirby game could be, and I really hope we get to see another game like this on the Switch too. Next we have Metroid Dread, which was the first 2D Metroid game to be featured in full HD graphics. Not only that, Metroid Dread was the first 2D Metroid game in nearly 2 decades. Personally, this was my first Metroid game and it really made me appreciate the genre more, and it's a great game, so if you haven't tried it out yet, you should really check it out. Going back to Breath of the Wild for a moment, this game was the first mainline Zelda game to ever receive DLC. So not only is Breath of the Wild the first mainline Zelda game to receive DLC, it got 2, whereas Tears of the Kingdom got 0, meaning it's also the only mainline Zelda game to get DLC. And since we're revisiting topics, let's look back at Pokemon, because in this Switch generation is the first time we got a fully open world Pokemon game. Starting with Pokemon Legends Arceus, it introduced open zone exploration for the first time in the Pokemon series, which was a really good step in the right direction. Then that game immediately got followed up by Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, the first truly fully open world game by Pokemon, which were also the first Pokemon games I've ever heard of Nintendo apologizing for. Next, let's talk about Animal Crossing, because Animal Crossing New Horizons was the first in the series to be released in full HD on a home console. Moving on, now let's talk about Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, because this game was the first game in the series that would receive additional content in the form of the Booster Course Pass, which was basically Mario Kart's solution to a season pass where periodically you would get new courses added to the game. Now let's finish off this video with probably what is Nintendo's latest first, because with The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom, this is the first ever Legend of Zelda mainline game where you don't play as Link and rather you play as Zelda, which I think a lot of people agree is a refreshing change of pace. I'm playing through this game right now and overall I'm enjoying it. The only thing I don't like is the menu system, because as I collect more and more echoes, I feel like it just becomes more of a task to sift through and I just don't like it. Overall, good game though. So far, at least. But with all that being said, now I want to hear from you. What was your favorite first we saw with the Nintendo Switch? And of course, it doesn't have to be one of the ones I've already named in this video because I'm sure there are plenty that I am forgetting, but yeah, please let me know in the comments below because I'm very curious. But with that being said, until next time, warao.